Your child is all grown up. They're 50 years old now. Why would they still need a trust? Well, there can be a variety of reasons. If you're wondering why I was holding the Mandalorian helmet or why I'm holding my little pal Grogu right here, it's because I recently shot a series of videos about the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda and what they can teach us about estate planning. And of course, people in the comment section noted that Grogu is not actually under the age of 18 because of his species and the way they age. He was 50 years old in the show. So that gave me an idea. Let's look at what happens when we talk about estate planning for your 50-year-old child. Just because your child is over the age of 18 doesn't mean they wouldn't benefit from the proper estate plan from you and making sure that their inheritance is going to be protected in a variety of ways. So when we're looking at using a trust for a child, especially one who's an adult, it's really not going to be about control. It's about protecting them. And there can be a variety of reasons why they could use that protection. Your trust will offer flexibility, it'll offer privacy, and it will offer you some peace of mind. So let's look at when a trust may be appropriate for your 50-year-old child. A common misconception we deal with is when somebody is grown up, especially if they're the age of 50, why would they even need a trust? Well, we can have a variety of reasons, whether it's from a financial planning side or maybe it's a substance abuse side. We can have a variety of reasons why that trust makes sense for your child. We want to look at whether or not they would benefit from the trust, and that's really the first question we look at. So there's 5 main reasons I see to use a trust for somebody who's in their 50s, and we're not limiting it to people in their 50s. It can apply for someone in their 30s or 40s or even older. The first main reason we look at is asset protection. So using a trust, and we have to decide, working with a professional, what trust works best. If we're looking for asset protection, we can use that trust to shield the assets from things like lawsuits, from creditors, or from a divorce. So if your child is a small business owner and they have some financial risk to that business, we want to look at whether the trust would be a beneficial way to protect their inheritance. I also would encourage you to start with the business side of things to make sure the business is properly formed. We have all the right documents in place so that we know we're protecting our risk both at the business side and then on the inheritance side with a trust. The second reason is we have somebody with either health or dependency concerns. So if you have a child with mental health issues, with a substance abuse history, with chronic illness, these can be reasons why a trust can be a great way to manage their inheritance so it doesn't all get lost, whether it's to drugs where they take the money and they spend it on drugs, or if they have health concerns, we can have money set aside in a trust to be able to pay some of those out-of-pocket medical expenses that can really rack up. Third benefit we can see is if we have somebody who has financial immaturity or they have really exorbitant spending patterns. So just because somebody is 50 does not mean that they know how to manage money well. But that trust can provide a structure, either with regular distributions or using your trustee to have the discretion of when money can be released to the beneficiary. What we can do is control some of those spending habits so we make sure we're protecting them in the long term. Fourth benefit is if we have a blended family or we have relationship complications, so especially if it's a second marriage and you both have children from a prior marriage, then it's important to consider how the laws in your state work, because normally if you've married someone, you don't have any estate plan in place, and this is a second marriage, whoever dies first, their children may be cut out of inheriting when the second spouse to die dies. So especially if you have a difference in age between the spouses, it can be very important to have a trust in place. Even if the kids are in the 50s, we want to make sure that you're protecting their inheritance so that you don't accidentally leave them with nothing because you got married later in life. And the final benefit can be to preserve your family wealth across generations. So we can keep your funds within your bloodline. We can use generation skipping planning. We can use lifetime asset management for a child. So even if they're into their 50s or older, we have something in place to manage it and make sure that your family legacy is being managed in the way that you want it to be managed. Now, there's a few different types of trusts that we've talked about here, and each one has their own pluses and minuses. The main trust we usually look at is revocable living trust, and the advantage of that is you can make changes. The disadvantage of that is that depending what the change is, you want to make sure the beneficiary is not in control. Spendthrift provisions, where making sure that they don't have access to all of the money that they can just spend at once. So we want to make sure that your revocable living trust has the right provisions built in. Another type is a testamentary trust, and so that trust will only go into effect after you pass away. So if while you're living, you're able to help your child, even into their 50s and later, managing money or whatever your concerns are, you can actually have the trust only set up after you pass away. And if you're a married couple, it can then only come into effect, if you would like, when the second of you to pass away passes away, so that we know As long as there's a parent alive, they're able to help manage the assets for your child. We also want to look at who should be the trustee of our trusts, so things like a family member or a friend or a professional fiduciary. So the family member is often who people prefer because they're going to know your child and know what their needs are. Hopefully your trusts can spell out exactly when they get their money and what discretion there is as far as when they can have distributions, when it can be spent. If we're going to use a family friend or just a friend of yours, we want to make sure we have very clear instructions in the trust as to how the money can be spent and when it's given to your child. And if we're going to look at a professional fiduciary, you need to understand that for them to manage the trust for you, it's going to cost money. So they usually will give you a quote as to what percentage of the assets or what their fee is to manage a trust for your child. So you want to make sure you understand those fees before you appoint a professional fiduciary. Some people are a little surprised to see how much money would be spent on the fiduciary, and they decide maybe that's not the way we want to go. Maybe that family member is the right person to work with. So in practice, the way we look at this trust and protecting our 50-year-old is we want to decide how frequently they get distributions. We could do it monthly, we can do it annually. They can be distributions for medical expenses, for educational expenses, housing expenses. You have to decide whether you're going to give your trustee discretion on how much and when the distributions can be made, or do you want it to be done on a fixed schedule? So let's say your child's going through a divorce at the age of 55. We want to make sure the trust is set up so those assets are not included as part of the marital estate. In my former practice, I used to do more divorce law, and this would become an issue when one of the spouses had a trust that was set up from their family, and usually it's a generation ago, and the other spouse says, wait a second, we were using this money and I think I'm entitled to a portion of the trust. Well, if that trust is set up correctly, it's not necessarily going to be a marital asset. So we also need to consider our legal and emotional considerations when we're looking at creating a trust for a 50-year-old. You need to make sure you're discussing it with the child, especially one without special needs. They may be a little offended if they have a trust set up to protect their money, but maybe their brother is allowed to get all of their money directly when they hit a certain age or they've already received their inheritance. This is a family dynamic question, and one that's important for you to understand and speak to your children about. So you don't even have to do the same provision for all of them. So if you have 3 children and only one of them needs that trust to protect them, you can have your will set up or have a trust set up just for that one child, and the other 2 can have their own inheritances on their own terms. But there's a family dynamic there, and it can cause some jealousy and a little family drama if they think that's unfair that their amount is being held in trust. The idea of the trust is we want to balance support with independence. So we want to make sure that your child, even at the age of 50, is getting some support, but is still able to be independent. And we want to make sure that they understand that this is not punishing them, it's protection. So this trust is going to really ensure your legacy that supports your child no matter what's going to be thrown their way. So if you have more questions, you'd like to talk about a trust for your child, whether an under 18 or whether an adult child, you can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. There's a red legal strategy session button on the front page. If you click that, you'll be taken to my personal calendar where we could set up a legal strategy session. It's a 15 or 20-minute phone call to discuss where you are in this process and some next steps for you and your estate plan. If you like this video, you can hit the like or thumbs up button below. You can subscribe on YouTube or head over to ayerslawtv.com. And just to be clear, I know that Grogu is over the age of 18. He's 50 years old, but even if he was human and he was 50 years old, he may still benefit from a trust.